Morning, everyone. Ooh. I'm too short, clearly. Good morning, everyone. 2 people said good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So, my name is Campbel-Pretty, for those who tweet. I'm at Pretty Agile. And today I'm going to talk to you about some of the things I've learned over the last 5 or 6 years about changing culture in organisations, particularly when it comes to applying Agile at scale. And when I say Agile at scale, I mean anything more than 3 or 4 Agile teams up to what have you, as many teams as you like. My journey into Agile started working with an organisation whose culture was toxic. Now, to be clear, this is not a word I'm using for effect. This is literally the way people spoke about the organisation. So people would come and visit, and when they left and people asked them, what did you think of that organisation? They would say, the culture is toxic. It had such a reputation in the industry that when we went to recruit people, we found that the recruiters would find people, say to them, would you like to come and interview with the client? They would be given the name of the client and the department, and their response would be, I don't need a job that badly. So this was a little bit interesting for me. I had inherited this team. I was a business person inheriting a technology team that nobody wanted to work in, and nobody wanted them to do any work for them either. So we had no one wanting to work there and no customers because we never delivered anything. It was a great place to start. It's a great job. So the challenge for me as the new general manager was, how was I going to make this work? Was this toxicity, can't say that word, just part of the organisation's DNA? I spent just over 2 years leading this team. And the change, I think it speaks for itself. Let's have a look at this. So in case it's unclear, that was a team of software developers doing the Macarena. So this was not my idea. There was a competition in the company that if you had to enter by getting dressed up in your company colours and having photos taken. And they desperately wanted to win the competition because they were going to win a gift voucher and they needed a PlayStation. So this was their entry into the competition. So a little bit different from this toxic culture that we started with. So I was reflecting on this event with my leadership team, and we were talking about the great vibe coming out of that day. And someone said to me, you know what, we're like a tribe. I went, I like that. I like that word. It has a really nice community feel to it. So I started researching what made tribes work. I came across David Logan's book, Tribal Leadership. And what David says is tribing is human nature. It is in our DNA. Birds flock, fish school, people tribe. It's just what we like to do. So by tribe, I mean 20 to 150 people. It's a number that reoccurs throughout human history. We see it in hunter and gatherer societies, we see it in the military, and for those who use SAFe, you see it in the Agile release train. But not all tribes are created equal. And what makes some tribes more effective than others is their culture. Logan did a 10-year study where he interviewed around 24,000 people. Well, him and his team interviewed around 24,000 people. And what they looked at was the language used in organisations and how that reflected the culture of the organisation. And he divided organisational culture up into five stages. So stage one is the culture of street gangs and prisons. Their language is life sucks, and it occurs in about 2% of the US population. Stage two is a culture you might associate with the public service. So the example Logan uses is the Department of Motor Vehicles. And the language they use is, my life sucks. And that occurs in about 22% of the US population. Stage three is the most prevalent culture in organisations. It's the culture we see in professions like doctors and lawyers. I'm great and you're not. There's no doctors or lawyers here, are there? Just checking. So this occurs in about 49% of the US population. Stage four is the culture of high-performing teams. Think about sports teams. We're great and you're not. And stage five is actually really hard to attain, and it can't be maintained over a long period of time. But it's a group that believes life is great, and they're generally doing things like fighting world-changing causes, curing cancer, global warming, and things of that nature. So why is all this culture stuff important? You know, you people are most likely a group of business people, want to get on and make good business decisions. Why does culture matter? Well, quite simply, to get happy customers, you need happy employees. Or as Tony Hsieh says, the CEO of Zappos, you can't deliver good service for unhappy employees. Seth Godin calls tribes a group of people connected to one another, connected to a leader, and connected to an idea. Let's explore that, starting with that connection to one another. If we want to create connections between people, it starts by creating awesome teams. We need awesome teams with a shared mission. So a real team. A group of people that just happen to work for the same manager does not equal an awesome team. It equals a group of people that just happen to work for the same manager. So our awesome team has to have a shared mission. They need to be in it together. They need to be trying to achieve something. Ideally, that team is small. So you've probably heard the mantra, 7 plus or minus 2. Why do they need to be small? So they can communicate. If you have a team of 5 people, you've got 10 different lines of communication. If you have a team of 10 people, you have 45 different lines of communication. Large teams really struggle to communicate. Therefore, they really struggle to get things done and deliver on those shared missions. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that's a textbook answer, right? I know that the science says you should do this, and science isn't necessarily always reality. So, how do you get there? You take a lean approach. You start where you are. And maybe that means you end up with small teams that are more component-based than ideally feature-based. But over time, you can cross-skill the small component-based teams and create the place for small feature-based teams. What's important is recognizing the value of that team being small and moving to a place where you can have that ideal feature team with that end-to-end mission. Now, if you're going to go start changing your organisations, you're probably going to start moving people around. And generally, the way that seems to be done is somebody sits in their office with a spreadsheet and creates teams. If you want to create teams that people buy into, if you want to change the culture of your organisation, try letting people decide for themselves what teams they're going to work in. I'm going to talk more about that this afternoon. So how the teams work are also important. Of course, we look to a world of agile practices to create those awesome teams. We like teams to visualize their work. And you'll notice physical walls I'm talking about here. Why? Because physical walls create conversations in a way that electronic tools do not. So we want teams that are visualizing their work, having shared understanding of how everybody contributes to how the work gets done. And we want to create conversations. We have our daily conversations, most agile teams, in the form of their stand-ups. Not a status report, right? A conversation about how we as a team are going to deliver on our mission. And of course, we're agile, we need to keep getting better. We're going to inspect and adapt, ideally on cadence. And if you're doing agile in the technical space, as Arlo's already told you, you need to have good technical practice. Agile at scale, agile even at small scale, does not work without good technical practice. So if we have awesome teams, we have a brilliant foundation to create an awesome tribe, an awesome team of teams. How do we do that? It starts with creating a shared identity. So identity is a very human need. We like to belong to things. When we feel that sense of belonging, we don't get that fight or flight instinct. So shared identity, a name and a theme can be really simple. My first tribe, EDW, Agile Release Train. Really simple. They were the Enterprise Data Warehouse, they were an Agile Release Train. The teams had train names. They were called Maglev and Soul Train and Hyperloop. Very simple. Maybe team name's a little bit smart. Student Administration, Agile Release Train, known as START. And they chose names for their teams that were superhero related, so the Justice League and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then there's just plain fun. A release train called the Galaxy that has teams called Stardust and Supernova and Mars Attack. Once those teams have names, we can get them to start to really connect with that identity using an exercise called Team Product Box. You may be familiar with an exercise used for visioning in Agile, which is that product box exercise. Create the box that you want your organisation product to come in. What we do with teams is we ask them to create the box that represents their organisation, their team. What do they represent? What customers do they serve? What value-adding features do they offer to their customers? And then we get those teams to present those product boxes back to each other, creating that connection across the teams. T-shirts are a really excellent way to reinforce that identity. In Australia, we like to go to Bali on our holidays because it's close and it's warm. And it's traditional when you go to Bali to bring home T-shirts for your friends and family. So when I started working with these guys, I went to Bali, did the right thing, and brought them back T-shirts. Their T-shirts had the tribe logo on the front and the tribe motto on the back. To connect the tribe, we also need shared experiences. My favourite approach to shared experiences is a ritual called Unity Hour. So this is the first hour of every sprint. We bring together everybody on the tribe and we spend time together. The agenda always changes. The only thing I can guarantee is it's always entertaining. So we'd have things like customers come and tell us what's important about the work we're doing and how the tribe's contributing to that. We'd play games, learning activities, Agile aeroplanes. We'd workshop problems, share what's going on in our individual teams. These guys are sharing using Pictionary as their approach. And occasionally we'd even find the odd Agile celebrity to come and deliver a workshop. One of the great things about Unity Hour is the way it created a space for people to share some of the things they were doing around fundraising. This particular tribe made Movember an annual event. I don't know if you have Movember here, but at home, basically people raise money for cancer and other things during the month of November by growing moustaches. As you can see, some people are better at that than others. During the month of November, Unity Hour would always have the Parade of the Mows, where the gents would show us their hard work. We could dot vote on who had the best moustache. And we could also award people for raising money or completely failing to grow a moustache over the course of an entire month, for which you would be awarded Miss Movember. Food's always a good idea. I hear you had Linda Rising out here a couple of years ago. If you've read Linda's book or listened to Linda's work, she'll tell you that when we share food with one another, we become fonder of one another because we let our defences down. So food can be somebody stopped and picked up pastries on the way to the office, or it can be a potluck lunch in the style that the guys have here. Although so far my trip to Israel, there has been no shortage of food at any meeting. So meeting every couple of weeks is great, but again, not enough to create that great culture. We need continuous human integration. We need people talking every single day. I like the idea of the cocktail party. This comes from Henrik Nieberg's Lean from the Trenches. It's a series of cascading stand-ups, starting with a short leadership connection in the morning, a series of team stand-ups, then a synchronization across everybody on the tribe. What's going on? What's important today? And then teams that have support functions meeting after that and taking their priorities for the day ahead from what came out of the cross-team communication. That can be done in under an hour. First place I started this has been running this still today, every day for 5 years. Series of cascading stand-ups kicks off the day, everybody knows what's going on. Communities of practice can also be useful and important, particularly if you're going to start moving into cross-functional teams and you're not used to working in that manner. My favourite approach comes from the Spotify model, where they use chapters. So groups of specialists may be split up across different teams, but we have chapters that meet on a regular basis to help people continue to grow and evolve their specialisations. And again, we're creating connectivity across the various teams in the tribe. Perhaps the thing that's most often forgotten when we look at teams of teams is how we celebrate. We're so quick to celebrate as a team, but if the true team is the tribe, we need to celebrate as a tribe. So we can have epic cake when we finish a project, but you've got to invite everybody, not just the people who worked on that particular project. We can have birthday cake. Now, I've worked this out. If you have about 100 people in your tribe, you can have birthday cake twice a week, every week of the year. And you'll start to like each other. Because eating food makes us fonder of each other. It's win-win. You can celebrate the number of sprints. I worked with a tribe once that's had a 50th sprint, or 50th iteration anniversary. They took the day off, played foosball, and we rock band. Not much coding was done that day. And when it comes to celebration, it doesn't need to be serious. It doesn't even need to be about work. You can celebrate International Talk Like a Pirate Day if you want to. Any excuse for a celebration. The one thing that's actually included in every single Unity Hour is a ritual called shout-outs. The way this works is people stand up in front of everybody in the tribe and say, "Thank you. Thank you for doing this for me. Thank you for helping me with this." Followed by a thunderous round of applause. Little wins celebrated every day is how we start to build a great tribal culture. So we've connected people to one another, but we need to connect them to a leader. This is easier said than done. You may have heard leaders referred to as the frozen middle. The idea being that any idea that the organisation wants to implement gets stuck at middle management. It can't find its way down to the people who do the work. It can't find its way from the people who do the work to the people who lead the organisation. So as a former middle manager, this doesn't really sit well with me. I'm not convinced all is exactly as it seems. So what I'd like you to do, in a moment what I'd like you to do. So one of the things I've observed as I've spent more and more time in the Agile community is when coaches talk about organisations, they very quickly land on this conversation about what to do about middle management. And the thing that they most frequently say is get rid of them or work around them. Every time, that's the conversation. So Deming told us people are already doing the best. The problems are with the system. Aren't managers people too? So, quick exercise. What I'm going to get you to do, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that you are a middle manager. There are 2 or 3 layers between you and the CEO, and you have a group of 50 to 100, 150 people who work for you. And you get the message, go Agile now. How do you feel about that? What goes running through your mind? What pain do you see in your future? Open your eyes. I'd like you to stand for a moment and find 2 neighbours and share your thoughts with one another. You need to stand, guys. You've been sitting for a long time. All right, grab a seat. Take your seats again, everyone. All right. Just waiting for a few more people to take their seats. Thank you, everyone. Obviously, I should never have let you start talking. This was a mistake. So, tell me. What happened in your conversations? Did anyone think about or talk about, what about me? What's going to happen to me when these teams go agile? Did anyone talk about fear? Did anyone talk about anything uncomfortable? Did any of those sorts of feelings or ideas come to mind when you put yourselves in the shoes of middle managers? Because often, that's actually what's going on. It's really uncertain, and it's really unclear what that manager's role is going to be in this new agile world. So we need to help them. They need to understand what their role is. What role does a manager play if everybody just went agile? For me, I can remember when I first got introduced to Agile, I got sent on 2 days of Agile fundamentals training. And I learned about writing user stories, and I learned about pairing, and I learned about test-driven development. And it was all very interesting, but it wasn't very helpful when it came to what was my role. My biggest takeaway was that I was a chicken. I was not a pig, I was a chicken, and my job was not to interrupt the teams. That was it. That was my mission. I was, in fact, at this point, literally frozen. I went and watched a team stand up, and there was a coach there, and she whispers in my ear, "Ask them if they need any help." And I whispered back, "But I'm a chicken, I'm not allowed to talk." So maybe the world's moved on a little bit since then, whether you use Leading Safe or other types of leadership training. There is now starting to be a message around what it means to be a leader in a lean agile world. But even 2 days of safe training is not going to create that connection between the leader and the tribe. We need leaders to get out of their office and go to the GEMBA. GEMBA, Japanese word for the real place where the work is done. Now, at least some of you are thinking, yeah, right, this is not going to happen. In part because wandering around looking at people on computer screens is really not that entertaining. But if you have physical visualizations, this will help to spark a conversation. So perhaps what this middle manager needs is a friend. So it can be a really lonely place. The world's changing, the teams have a new role, you don't know what your role is. So a friend, someone to listen to you, someone who you respect, someone who respects you enough to argue with you, someone who'll drag you to the GEMBA. And even if you don't need to be dragged, it's always nice to have company. I worked with a coach that took it upon himself to drag me to the GEMBA. He used to take me on this little wander around the floor. We called it Walk the Walls. And he'd get me to visit every team. And I used to say to him, that was, again, very interesting, but what was the point of that? And then he taught me some magic words. How can I help? So instead of wandering around and having nice chats with people, wander around, have nice chats with people, and say, what can I do to help you? This was a really eye-opening experience. There are things that are absolutely insurmountable to the people who do the work that are really simple for a manager to solve. The one that always stands out for me is the guy who says, I need more RAM for my computer. Gone, okay, why do you need more RAM for your computer? He says, well, you remember when we upgraded all our software 2 months ago? Yes, it doesn't run on the standard machines. Okay, what have you been doing for 2 months? Oh, I bought it in my own computer and hacked the corporate network. I mean, it's fine. So it was easier to breach corporate security than it was to get somebody to upgrade his computer. Kind of mind-boggling. But for me, that was a phone call, that was an email. It was very easily solved once I knew there was a problem. So this started to thaw the way I was perceived by that organisation. Part of what was happening is by talking to people, I became human. So I was a real person, not a figment of their imagination that sat in the corner office and was kind of scary. And secondly, they gave me homework and I would do it. And that would begin to build trust. Of course, I had to be reminded to do the homework, but as long as you follow through, it begins to build trust. So that leads me to, what do we do with all this information? And what is that role of leadership? It's to serve the people who do the work. So some of the things you pick up at the GEMBA will be simple. Some things won't even come up in that little conversation. So what I would often ask teams to do is, following their retrospectives, their inspect and adapt, is to bring their problems to the leadership team for resolution. So here are the things that are outside our control. Here are the systemic issues that we can't fix. Leaders, we are giving these things to you and we're asking you for help. I call that ritual the bubble up. And then I expect the leaders to work the same way that everybody else works. As an agile team, visualising their work, communicating daily. Of course, this particular team was a little bit better at sporadic improvement than continuous improvement. Perhaps the most powerful thing that a leader can do to create a connection with their tribe is be vulnerable. Brené Brown calls this the vulnerability paradox. Vulnerability is the last thing I want you to see in me, but the first thing I look for in you. So let me illustrate. Remember that Macarena I showed you in the beginning? You may or may not have noticed I did not appear in that Macarena. I had to take the video, right? I mean, they needed the video, so they couldn't win the competition if they didn't have some evidence that they had actually, gotten dressed up and done the Macarena. That did not go down well at all with the teams. So one of the teams came to bubble up with their complaint. M did not do the Macarena. So I started by confessing I don't know how to do the Macarena. And then we entered negotiations. And this is where we landed.
I know we're ready to start. Where's the clapping?
It doesn't get any better. So, that's, I don't know if you have that here, it's called the bus stop. It's what kids do when I was growing up, what kids used to do at school discos. And that was my leadership team. You will note yet again, I was a little bit on the short side. Anyway, when you do this, when you get up in front of teams and you make a fool of yourself, what it tells people is you're human. And it shows that you can be trusted. So if we want our teams to be transparent and vulnerable with us, we need to create a space in which they're willing to do that. So finally, we also need to connect with an idea. This doesn't need to be anything fancy. Just communicate your vision, whatever that might be. Doesn't have to be, we're going to the moon. My vision when I launched the EDW train was a team that could deliver something. In fact, a team that could deliver anything was what I was looking for initially. And A one-team culture. Group of people who like to work together. Group of people who like to come to work. And then over time, as we had on the back of our t-shirts, we aspired to be world leaders in Agile data warehousing. So, you've got a great tribe. How are we going to sustain that? How are we going to maintain it? So, a simple thing I like to do is actually measure what's going on. So there's a thing called the Net Promoter System, or the Net Promoter Score, and organisations use it to measure loyalty to products and services. So would you recommend the products or services of company X? It also works when you look at where people like to work. So would you recommend working on the EDW Agile release train to a friend or colleague? And what we do is we take the 9s and the 10s and we say, these are promoters, these are people who really seriously would recommend this place. And the 7s and 8s we ignore because they're not passionate enough to really do it. And 6 and below are actually most likely to say something negative about the organisation, so they're detractors. And you end up with a score on a scale from plus 100 to minus 100. What's easy about this is you can use SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, what have you. You can send it to everybody on your tribe, even the contractors, because you know they're real people, right? It's true. So everybody on the tribe, permanent employee, contractor, consultant, ask, would you recommend and why did you give that score? Do it once every 3 months. It takes them about 60 seconds to give you an answer. You get a score and you get actionable data. So you can monitor the health of your tribe over time. The bottom line, what am I really talking about here? Creating an environment in which people feel safe to be themselves at work. I can remember telling a friend about all of this years ago, and she said to me, no one's ever going to believe this. They're going to think you're a bunch of wacky Australians. For the record, some of these people were wacky Australians, but many of them weren't. They were just normal people who brought their personalities into the workplace. So when I left the EDW group that started all of this, their parting gift to me was a short feature film. I can't share that with you today, but I am going to share a short snippet just to give you a little bit of a taste of what happens when people really feel safe in the workplace.
IR 5869, feature 2034, we still haven't received something done.
Okay, Jean. Okay. Bye.
That's supposed to be me.
So, Wayno, Jean and I were just discussing how we can be a little bit more innovative in how we communicate. So, I want to try something different at the feature wall. Have a think about it, and we'll discuss it a little bit more.
IR 5869, feature 2034, we're still waiting for sample data.
I'm not quite sure that's what I was referring to, Wayno, but have another go.
Okay, so what we found out in today's stand-up was there a few issues, defects. Then we did a retrospective. Then we started working on it. That's how the disco's getting done.
Nailed it, Wayno. Nailed it. That's a good blog. I've got a blog. Megsy, got another blog.
I used to blog about them a lot, so they're teasing me. So, when creating tribal unity, remember, what makes some tribes more effective than others is their culture. Awesome teams are the foundation of awesome tribes. Connect teams by creating a shared identity, investing in shared experiences, and fostering cross-team communication. Thaw the frozen middle by creating connections between leaders and the tribe. Remember that vulnerability builds trust, and focus on creating an environment where people feel safe to be themselves in the workplace. One last message. I like this. This is from Richard Sheridan's book, Joy Inc. I don't assume what worked for me will work for you, but I do want to inspire you as you contemplate what an intentional culture of joy could look like in your world.